We're live.
Are we Facebook Live?
Hey,
We
Facebook Live.
Hey, Facebook Live. Here we are.
Instagram Live.
Instagram Live and
YouTube.
that right there. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about, we're following up. Obviously, thank you, Dr. Rob Sinnott. I don't have the cover on mine because I've ripped it up accidentally because I read his book a lot. But we're going to be covering, this is from, obviously, following textbook Human Adaptability. And it was interesting when I posted it yesterday, and this morning I had a couple of friends who were like, what is that? Their brains were spinning. And I was like, we're going to bring it simple. Mm-hmm. And the stuff we're going to talk about is simple. So I used the big words because, well, we had a lot of money in student loans. We're going to use the big words. And obviously you have more than me because I'm much older. And back when I was in school, our loans were what you guys have. Don't even start on that. So anyway, so transgenerational stress. What is it? Transgenerational stress is really pretty simple. It's and I got some research here, which I'm probably not going to get into today after what these guys just shared with me, but I want to get into with you eventually. But basically what we're talking about, the fancy words, it's the transmission of adverse effects, demands of stress placed upon the mother and the developing fetus and how it impacts the offspring. Human words, what this means is when mom's pregnant and she's exposed to the physical, mental, and emotional stressors, or as we say, the traumatism, toxins, and autosuggestions, how those impact the developing fetus. And it does so in a way that it actually alters their genetic structure. We call that what? Epigenetics. So, and what it does is, believe it or not, it changes the genes. Well, what controls and regulates the demands placed upon that developing mother is the nerve system. The autonomic nerve system. Two functions of that autonomic nerve system: speed up, slow down. Check this out. Guess what chiropractors who adjust, guess what they work with? The nerve system. The autonomic nerve system. So when those demands are placed upon you, what we do with our technology we use in our office is we can measure that sympathetic and that parasympathetic function, which is the accelerator or the brake, which one needs addressed, identify that, give a specific chiropractic adjustment, so therefore the body can adapt. What happens when mom is exposed to stress? She has an increased amount of cortisol. When there's that increased amount of cortisol into the bloodstream, what that does, that cortisol will actually alter the transcription of the genes. What that means is it changes the code. When it changes the code, it'll impact that developing child. And some of the stuff that I found were just amazing. Like, here's what's really interesting that I'm going to change, but check this out, and then I'll stop here. But it'll cause it, and this is from Dr. Sinnott, a research article he sent me, shortened gestational period, poor pregnancy outcomes, and delayed offspring development.
Well, that sounds like over 50% of pregnancies today.
Now, let's take this. This is what's amazing. When that increased stress is placed upon that mom, there's only about 10 to 20% of that cortisol, increased cortisol, hits the fetus. Let's repeat that again. When mom is exposed to stress because she has a subluxation, when she's exposed to stress, she develops what's called a vertebral subluxation. Now it alters mom's ability to adapt to the demands on the external environment. As a result, then you heard what happens to the fetus, but there's that cortisol increase, and that's essentially, that's what changes the neuroendocrine function. Mm-hmm. Only 10 to 20% of that cortisol hits that fetus. Thank goodness that's all. Can you imagine if it was more? So what I'm getting at is you should get your nerve system checked, especially in today's environment. I'm done. Mm-hmm. I said it was really quick. That was really quick for me, wasn't it?
Really good. So we're going to roll onto the epigenetics part. So really people have a harder time understanding what is epigenetics. You know, we use a lot of big words. I'm going to bring it down simple a little bit. Best analogy I can think of is basically a conductor of an orchestra. Your cells are like the individual musicians. They all have their instruments. They all have their jobs. They're meant to do a certain thing and play a certain way. Your DNA, the genetics part, that's the music. So everything is dependent on the conductor, which is your nerve system. If the conductor needs you to speed up, then everything will speed up, but they're still reading that music. If they need you to slow down, then they'll slow down. Now, if there's a subluxation, that could be like the dimming of the lights or some background noise, or anything that's interfering with that proper ability to be able to see the conductor. So when that happens, it can start to ruin certain parts of the piece, or it can just ruin the whole piece altogether. So essentially what the chiropractor does is help restore that optimum communication between the conductor and the rest of the musicians. Now to show you what that looks like in real terms.
So I'm going to stop here for a second. So what Dr. C is saying, it's like going and listen to a fine orchestra, professional orchestra, versus which is a perfect, functioning, genetically developed orchestra, correct?
Yeah.
Versus going and listen to a third grade band recital. And unfortunately, in the world today, we're allowing a lot of third grade, and not busting on third grade band recitals, but I'm using that as an example, but we're allowing a lot of third grade band recitals to continue to develop. There's a profession out there, and some of our profession that's totally, they're okay with that. We're not okay with that at all. So, go ahead.
And show how.
Just had to get that out there.
Of course. Isn't that how I said it? So looking at how it relates to mom versus baby, you know, smoking is a very well understood thing. That if mom smokes, come down here. If mom smokes while baby's pregnant, then that's going to affect the baby. Well, as the baby's developing, they soon become unhealthy because obviously mom's taking in a lot of toxins that are interfering with that. Well, when that baby's born and when they grow up, those same genetic changes that when mom did while she was smoking affect that baby. And so therefore, this baby, their genetics will change for their future kids. So it's important that we start here at the root cause, which is why we're so passionate about taking care of full families and moms and soon-to-be moms.
Good.
You read like half mine, by the way, so that was good. Thank you, Dr. Koca. So basically, when a pregnant mom has the failure to adapt to stress, she's in the stress vulnerability state, that it increases her glucocorticoids, cortisol, basically.
The sun.
Excuse me. More stress, less adaptive function equals more cortisol. Anyway, fetal exposure can not only lower the birth weight, which we talked about last week, but it can lead to a myriad of other disease
But
paths.
stop right there. Here's what's funny. More or less kids being born low birth weight.
More.
And our that profession is like, well, it's just happening. So let's provide them with more drugs.
Mm-hmm.
How is that solving a problem here when it could be resolved here?
It's like they don't comprehend that your drugs are probably doing that to the babies.
Or they do comprehend, but they are like, I don't care because I just want to make more money.
Yeah.
Show me the money!
So, in a recent study, they actually did it on 655 pregnant women, and they measured their salivary cortisol levels and compared it to the weight of their children through the next 16 years. So, elevated cortisol in the mom while she was pregnant, do you think that increased or decreased the kid's weight at 16 years old? Highly elevated.
Seriously?
At 16.
At 16?
Through 16, they measured it for 16 years. So the kid's weight actually went up.
Oh, went up. Okay.
The kid's weight went up after mom had those higher cortisol levels during pregnancy. So mom was exposed to unadapted stress, and that cortisol impacted the child through at least 16 years.
Now, what regulates, controls, and regulates the cortisol? What helps the body, what system helps the body control and regulate everything?
The
Nerve system.
And who works with the nerve system?
Chiropractors.
Who adjust?
Chiropractors.
Who adjust?
Of course.
There you go.
So each year, there's more and more studies that show the impact of stress and how it relates to moms, babies, kids, grandparents, everything.
Stop right there. Here's what for people listening here now. Cortisol is a chemical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is directly related to higher or lower stress levels. The higher level of stress, what happens to cortisol levels? They go up.
If they're unadapted.
If they're unadapted stress. Well, I mean, cortisol goes up in a
It does,
state,
but
but
it's more
unadapted
strong.
it's more
Yes.
more dangerous. What Big Pharma and its offspring, how's that, want to do is if there's an unadapted stress, increased cortisol, which is a chemical compound being released due to stress. What do? They provide more chemicals, which then does
It
more
has
or
more
less
stress.
work for the body, more stress, more demands placed on the body.
The body has to heal twice.
Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, and this is what's amazed me. This is really pretty simplistic. Would it not make sense to figure out why our cortisol level is out of control and help that system control and regulate it better? Or should we just add more chemistry and further confuse the body? Don't choose option B.
And this may also impact permanent uncoordinated stress adaptability. So not just child short term, but long term. And we're talking about epigenetics, we're talking about generational as well.
Now, Dr. Francoeur, let me ask you a question. That study that you just read there,
Huh?
obviously because we do have those out there, they'll say chiropractic studies aren't peer reviewed. Are you correct? I mean, have you heard that?
Yep.
What chiropractors did that study? Was it chiropractors?
No, it wasn't.
I didn't think so.
It wasn't?
Interesting.
Weird.
Weird, isn't it?
Huh.
See, here's what's scary about this. I said we were going to go short, we're going to go long. Because poor Mike's got stuff. Dr. Price has got stuff.
I could do my own show.
Oh, now it's all about him.
No, I'm just saying, I got enough info, I could go for a while.
But here's what's sad. These are not studies done like in just something. These are really flippin' cool studies. Good save, wasn't it? Flippin' cool studies that are out there. So, all right, your turn.
Okay.
Because I got to end with this. This is a good
I got some cool stuff. Okay, so I got these pictures here. So stress, we're gonna zoom in just on this little part, this little window here. Pregnancy anxiety, stress, mom's overloaded, mom's not adapting well to the stresses going on. What we see is the maternal HPA axis. It's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's this big long thing where there's all these parts of your nerve system that are connected, and each one releases a certain type of hormone to cause the other one to release more hormones in order to get the body's biochemistry or makeup functioning like it should, dependent on the situation. Well, what happens during a mom who is pregnant and anxious, her body gets into that fight or flight state and gets stuck. So in our realm of chiropractic, we look at it as she's in a fight or flight state, so her body's stuck there. So what do we need to do with someone like that? We want to slow things down. Well, with her, when she's stuck like that, if she doesn't get checked and adjusted so her nerve system can regulate that properly and get her back to a more ideal or homeostatic state, now what happens is this increases, like Dr. Matt said, the placental corticotropins, or the corticoids, or cortisol. And then what that does is now the fetus has this HPA axis that's also in a stress state and is stuck there. So just like they were talking about, this happens, and that fetus, and as well as in many studies what they're seeing is if the fetus is a female, her eggs are actually affected by this. We can get into that at a later topic, but that's a little mind-blowing for you. So the next thing to look at is developmental critical periods. So these developmental windows, when mom has her maternal stress, the baby, and this is what's interesting, because you would think because the nerve system develops so highly during the early phases of the early terms, what Dr. Rob's book talks about and what he found was it's actually the later stages of pregnancy when it has the most effect.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's going to have an
But
effect.
that's for adaptability, though, too. The body's...
Right.
Think about this. Here's what's happening. The body is already, that system, is trying to adapt to its stressors innately without consciously thinking about it.
Yep.
That would answer that question.
True. So when this is happening, now that baby, they're going to be have a lower, what we call threshold, or their body's ability to adapt to stresses is going to be much, much lower now because they received that stress load from their mother. So since their HPA axis was off, now they didn't develop properly through those critical periods. Now their body has a lower threshold, meaning if instead of being at 100%, they're at 90% or 80%. So that little bit of stress that may seem to set somebody over the edge, most people wouldn't have any effect on them. So these things are what we pass on generation after generation when we have this unadapted stress.
So, I mean, we're good, right?
Yes.
Yep.
That's heavy. I mean, that's some heavy stuff right there. I think for those chiropractors out there watching this, because I know you are, I'd watch this one over and over again.
And then get Rob's book and
Let's
read
say
it.
if you have the book.
Yeah, get it. I have like 6 of them because I have to have one in front of me all the time. I need Dr. Rob. Rob, read it to me. He's not listening.
He is listening.
Is he really? Hi, Rob.
Hi,
You're
Rob.
supposed to be in Mexico. So,
You didn't take us with him?
I tried. But here's what's interesting is even and for the our lay people out there listening, hi Jim. This stuff is powerful. Basically, here's what in a nutshell. We'll kind of wrap it up here. Your nervous system controls and regulates everything. The autonomic nervous system's job is to keep the vegetative, to create vegetative homeostasis for the organism. Sympathetic speeds up, parasympathetic slows down. When the demands are greater, and we have a mom that's in that is a pregnant mom, this is what we're talking about now, which we're going to get into other scenarios. For pregnant moms, look how it increases that maternal cortisol, and then that impacts that child. I mean, Dr. Rob sent me an article, which I can't wait to read here, but I think we're going to kind of cover these articles next week and skip the book and just kind of run into his book. But this is just right in what Dr. Frank Kors said. I'm coming. Maternal salivary cortisol levels during pregnancy are positively associated with overweight children. Yep. Think about that for a second and look around. So there's a cause right there.
We'll explain that next week.
Exactly. But we talk right here. It's here, people. It's here. Increased stress changes cortisol, changes genetics, changes outcome. What controls and regulates that is your nerve system. It's not adding more drugs. It's your nerve system. Chiropractors, my suggestion, I'd start thinking about adjusting again. Because I got to tell you what, when you adjust, it helps the body adapt. It can control and regulate. The demands are much easier for that person to adapt to.
Yep.
I mean, it's that simple. Yep. Moms out there listening to that, man, give us a call. Let's start getting these moms checked, these kids checked, so they can no longer be a research study and live like they were meant to live, which is fully adapting in a state of stress resiliency, not a state of stress vulnerability. Rob, I appreciate you. I love you. Have fun in Mexico, man. You know how much I love you.
Have fun,
So
Rob.
we're out here.